We've had like
Ready?
3.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd ask that you would please rise as we welcome Pastor Kate Bruns to lead us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. O Lord our God, we ask your blessings upon these men and women charged with the governance of this community. As we all have enjoyed the extra day of rest from this Labor Day weekend, may they now be renewed to engage in the business of leadership and team building. And let us look to the skies and marvel at the V formations of the wild geese flying overhead, following their autumn migrations south, recognizing their shared responsibilities of leading and also following, balancing work and rest. You, O Lord, did not create us for work alone, but for a rich and balanced life shared with family and community. May we listen to your wise guidance to serve our neighbors and to be grateful recipients of their generous reaching out to us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, September 7th, 2021, and we'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council to order. Roll call, please.
Chris Thompson is absent. Arneson.
Here.
Gustafson.
Here.
Hicks.
Here.
Fish is absent. Hager.
Here.
Bonnie.
Here.
And Cooper is also absent.
We have a quorum. First item of business this evening is the approval of the agenda. And I'll call on our city administrator, Andrew Bremseth, for any additions or corrections. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, Your Honor, council members. We are going to switch around the order of the agenda real quick here this evening and have our life-saving award ceremony first. Slide that in front of the public hearings. Otherwise, the agenda should be as presented.
Thank you, Andrew. With that, I would
I'll make that motion.
motion. Thank you,
I'll
Anthony.
second.
Thank you, Krista. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So with that, we will call on our Chief of Public Safety, Kyle Bergen, to present the Citizen Life Saving Award. Good evening, Chief.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before I begin, we had another event in the community just a week ago. We'll be recognizing some other people as well for a life-saving event at the high school. And hopefully have them before you maybe in the early October meeting. But tonight I'd like to call up Joseph Meyer. Joseph, would you like to come up here? And I promise I won't make you talk. You can just stand next to me. I talked to Joseph on the phone and he decided it would be better if I did all the talking tonight. So should we stick with that plan? All right. Sounds like a good idea. So I was contacted by a community member that told me a story about Joseph coming to the aid of his father who had been choking. So I had reached out to his mom, Shar, and asked if I could have an opportunity to talk to Joseph, and we got that arranged. And last spring, Joseph was having lunch with his dad, and I think you were having soup with dumplings in it. And one became lodged in his father's throat. And he was unable to clear it on his own. So Joseph came to his aid and helped clear the obstruction for his father. So tonight I'd like to provide Joseph with the Citizens Award for coming to the aid of a choking victim. So there you go.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Joseph, for those efforts. Thanks for being here. With that, we will move to our public hearings. The first public hearing is for a proposed establishment of a tax increment financing district. And I will call on our Community Development Manager, Clara Beck. Good evening, Clara.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm really here just to introduce Mr. Tom Denaway, who will go into more of the details of this project, this proposed project. We'll be holding a public hearing tonight to begin discussion of a housing TIF district over by the RTC campus. This has been a long time in the works, with lots of conversation with the developer and also with our advisors at Baker Tilly. Tom Denaway is one of those advisors, and he is with us tonight to help walk through the process, answer any questions, and provide some insight into the financial analysis that was done to determine the need for TIF financing, et cetera. So with that, I think we can open the public hearing and then hear from Mr. Denaway.
I would hear the presentation.
Yeah, let's go ahead and, thank you, Clara. We'll go ahead and call on Tom Denaway. Good evening, Tom. We'll go ahead and hear your presentation, then we'll open it up to the public. So, the floor is yours, Tom.
Sounds good. Everybody able to hear me all right?
Not very much.
All right, I'm going to try sharing my screen to pull up. 1 second here. All right, is everybody able to see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
And we can hear you good too now.
That's better.
Okay. All right, so tonight we're in the process of holding a public hearing for proposed TIF Housing District number 4-14. For the presentation, I'm going to provide a quick overview of tax increment financing, more in brief than maybe the last time. We'll talk about specifically what makes a project or a district a housing district. We'll talk about the project itself, and then we'll get into the TIF projections on the but-for finding. Sorry, my mouse is being more than a little sensitive. So TIF is a method of capturing tax-based growth resulting from the new development. So it captures the new local taxes, that incremental growth in market in property taxes that results from the new development that occurred and the increased market value. And it uses those future local taxes to pay for public improvements related to the development. There's a fixed term for the capture, and then ultimately at the end of the TIF district, that new development gets added to the tax base to the benefit of all the taxing jurisdictions as a result of that new market value coming online. The goal of TIF is to be a gap financing tool. It's to make projects happen that would not otherwise happen. And that's where we get into what's known as the but-for test. We want to ensure that we're only incentivizing projects that would not have occurred but for the requested TIF assistance. And we'll talk about how we answer that in a little bit. TIF is used mainly by cities and counties, and it helps to provide an incentive for development to help a development occur that might not otherwise occur. So this graph here kind of shows visually how a TIF district works. So on the bottom in this kind of teal section is the base taxes. So the property that would be within a TIF district, all the taxes applicable to that property that are currently being paid prior to the development of the property would continue to flow to each of the taxing jurisdictions over the duration of the TIF district. When the new value gets added from a new building that gets constructed, or new townhomes or twin homes, the future growth in property taxes as a result of that new development is what gets captured. So it's this growth in taxes in this kind of gray box here that gets captured as TIF, redirected to the county, or captured by the county, and then redirected to the city as tax increment revenue. Then that capture happens over a period of time depending on the type of TIF district. At the end of the TIF district, and once it's satisfied its obligations, the district is decertified, and now everybody gets to benefit in this kind of green column from that new tax base. So base taxes continue to flow. The growth, or the incremental growth in market value leads to new taxes. That gets captured for a period of time, and then at the end of the district, everybody benefits. So the type of TIF districts, there's a number of different types of TIF districts. The one we are talking about tonight is housing, and the criteria for the creation of a housing district is the creation of housing opportunities for people of low and moderate income. The maximum duration of a housing district is 25 years from the first receipt of increment. The total duration of a housing district can be up to 26 total years. TIF can only be used to fund certain types of things, public improvements, land acquisition, soil correction, site prep demolition, building improvements, relocation, financing fees, capitalized interest, and administrative expenses. So the city can retain up to 10% of the increment annually to fund their cost of administering the district. Any expenses that are incurred under that administrative retainage have to be directly related to the administration of the district. We can't just capture that 10% and use it for anything. There has to be a direct correlation between those costs and the administration of the district. But the city is able to capture that portion to help offset their cost of reporting and documenting the district and the like. We talk about public improvements. We're talking about things like streets, roads, utilities, bridges, and interchanges, parking, sidewalks, and walkways, and then design costs related to those. The important thing to remember with these public improvements is that there needs to be a direct nexus to these improvements and the TIF district and the boundaries of the TIF district. We can't, create a TIF district on one side of town to pay for a new street on the other side of town. There has to be a direct correlation between why these public improvements are being incurred and funded with TIF and then the geographical location of the TIF district. For housing districts, what qualifies a housing district is the end use of the development. Housing districts are able to be created because they create affordable housing opportunities for people based on certain income limitations. Depending on if the development is going to have for sale units, one measure has to be met. If the development is going to have rental units, one of two tests must be met. In this case, we're looking at a mixed use or a mixed project that will have both homes that will be getting sold. So for the owner occupied units, 95% of the units must initially be purchased by individuals whose family income is less than or equal to a little more than $107,000, which is based on the current median incomes and the TIF statute, the citation within the TIF statute. For the rental property, the rental units need to be occupied, a portion of the rental units need to be occupied by people that meet one of two tests. And in the case of this development that we haven't decided yet which test will be met, it's something that can be negotiated between the city and the developer and will be agreed upon ultimately within a development agreement. With the rental units, they would have to certify each year to the city that they've met these standards and that they have income qualified the people in the set aside units, and they'll have to document that as a condition of getting any TIF reimbursement. So for the rental units, either 20% of the units need to be set aside for persons whose income is less than 50% of the area median income, or 40% of the units have to be set aside for incomes that are less than 60% of the area median income. So in both components of this development, a significant portion of the homes will need to be set aside for income qualified individuals, either at the time of purchase or on an annual basis with the rental property. So the map here, hopefully this shows up well enough for you guys, and if not, it's within the TIF plan. The map here shows the boundaries of the TIF district. It's just west of Park Street and just north of Union Avenue. It's this platted lot with Campus Drive going through it, and I believe this is in the process of being replatted from maybe what's being shown here. This is the existing plat that I think is on the GIS website. This is the boundaries of the TIF district. All the development that is going to occur with the district will be within these boundaries. All the revenue that will be generated from the growth of market value and property taxes will occur only on the property within this development, and the expenditures of the TIF dollars will be within the boundaries of these parcels or within any adjacent road right-of-way. The project itself, so the developer is proposing a mix of units. They're proposing that 36 owner-occupied twin homes will be developed, and that there would also be an additional 10 rental townhomes that would kind of be in that the northwest corner of the development. They're expecting that the twin homes will be built out over a period of 6 years, starting potentially with a little bit of construction maybe this fall, with the first phase of construction really starting in earnest in the spring of next year, and then the rental townhomes would be built likely within the following year. So the county provided us with estimated market values for each of the units. The twin homes, it's $289,760 after the market value exclusion credit, which is a property tax credit that is provided by the state of Minnesota to owner-occupied houses. And then the total estimated market value for rental townhomes would be $176,000 per unit. In order to approve a TIF district, one of the statutory findings we have to make is what's known as the but-for test. So the finding is that the proposed development, in the opinion of the city, would not reasonably be expected to occur solely through private investment within the reasonably foreseeable future. So the idea behind the but-for test is that the proposed development would not occur but for the use of tax increment assistance. So by making this test, we're ensuring that we're not incentivizing something that would already happen. We want to make sure that we're only using TIF in circumstances where it's warranted, that it's being used in a circumstance where the project might not be financially feasible without the use of TIF. So the but-for test answers that underlying statutory question, but it also helps us answer the secondary question of how much assistance is necessary. We want to, make sure that we're not incentivizing projects that don't require TIF, but if we are incentivizing projects that do require TIF, we want to make sure that we're not overpaying simply. We want to make sure that the amount of assistance that's being requested is warranted. So the objective is to provide the minimum amount of subsidy required to complete the project, as well as mitigate any city risk. So in evaluating this project and in making that but-for finding, we're able to answer that question, that kind of somewhat esoteric but-for question, by looking at financial feasibility of the project. We can evaluate if a project would be likely to occur without the requested assistance by looking at the potential rate of return a developer would realize on their initial investment. If that rate of return is below market standards or is, significantly lower than what would be expected for this type of project, we can then make the determination that somebody would not invest in an inherently risky real estate development for a rate of return that, might not be that significant or might be available from much more safer investments. So we're able to kind of answer that somewhat abstract but-for question in a truly subjective manner by looking at the potential return on the project that the developer would realize with and without the requested TIF assistance, because we're able to use that as a dividing line to determine if the assistance is necessary. So in this case, we evaluated a 10-year operating pro forma showing the development of both phases of the project, the sale of all the pad sites for the townhome or for the twin homes, and then the continued renting for a 10-year period of the rental townhomes. So we looked at that pro forma, we prepared a pro forma, we prepared what's known as an internal rate of return analysis, which is a return on investment measure that accounts for the time value of money. And then we also evaluated the project assumptions for cost and operating revenues that were used to prepare that pro forma. We want to make sure that we're looking at reasonable assumptions. We know these are assumptions and that amounts are likely to change to a certain degree, but we want to make sure that we're not looking at a set of assumptions that was created in a manner to try to show a need for assistance when one might not actually be present. We want to make sure that we have as good and as reasonable of assumptions used within this analysis as possible. So we evaluated the project costs and the operating revenues with the market comps to the extent that we were able to, and found them to be reasonable in nature while still being obviously assumptions. So we did all that, and we used that to calculate an unleveraged internal rate of return for the project without assistance of about 4.05%. So what does that 4.05% mean in regards to a feasible project? Well, to come up with a feasible benchmark, we turned to the PricewaterhouseCoopers Real Estate Investor Survey. That is a national survey of developers that tries to identify what type of benchmark targets are they looking for when it comes to a feasible project of this nature. The investors and developers surveyed within that identified a target average of 6.69% for investment in a housing rental project. So given that 4.05% is about almost 40% less than 6.69%, that tells us that without assistance, this project is going to have a rate of return that falls significantly below what we would consider to be a feasible benchmark of 6.69%. That 6.69% as a feasible benchmark is also a very conservative, i.e. a very low benchmark. We've tried to set that at a low hurdle rate to make this test as difficult as possible. Even in spite of that, the expected return of this project falls significantly below that. That allows us to make that first finding that we don't think in our analysis that the project would be unlikely to proceed for the requested TIF assistance, because the potential return on investment to the developer is significantly below what would be anticipated for a project of this type. The other thing we do on is we calculate similarly what is that rate of return with the TIF assistance. For this project with TIF, we calculated a rate of return of about 7.28%. This really helps us answer that second question of, are we over-incentivizing the project? Again, the 6.69% number is a low compared to the benchmark. And the rate of return for the project with assistance of 7.28 is just barely above this benchmark and still a very reasonable rate of return. So what this tells us is that A, TIF is warranted because the project wouldn't be financially feasible without it, and B, the amount of TIF assistance that's being requested is reasonable and we would not be over-incentivizing the project. Together, both of those things allow us to make that but-for finding, which is ultimately that the project is unlikely to proceed for the requested TIF assistance. The TIF plan identifies authorized costs capable of being reimbursed by future TIF revenue. The TIF plan budget that is proposed and within the TIF plan and put in front of you is based off of revenue assumptions that assume the full build out of the site, as well as a market value inflator. It's important to remember with the TIF plan is that it provides budget authority. By approving a TIF plan and creating a TIF district, it doesn't actually obligate the city to do anything beyond just the act of creating the TIF district. The second step of actually obligating the city to take action and either reimburse the developer for cost or issue bonds or what, depending on whatever the structure of the proposed deal is, actually comes in the second step, which would be the development agreement and the approval of a proposed development agreement. So right now, and on tap for tonight's discussion is simply the creation of the TIF plan, the creation of the TIF district, and the creation of a budget authority to enter into future obligations. So when we created this TIF district, we ran the projections out for market value for the full 26-year term in order to maximize that TIF plan budget and provide as much authority as potentially possible within the projections while still being reasonable within our assumptions for the future TIF revenue. So the TIF plan has budget authority for up to $1.9 million in TIF eligible costs related to the acquisition and the development of this site. The specific amount to be reimbursed and the specific amount of improvements will be further defined at the time that the development agreement is being prepared. So for tonight, the TIF plan just is creating budget authority, which would give the city and the city council the ability to enter into future obligations under that authority. Included within the TIF plan budget is the ability to also reimburse either yourself or a developer for interest on their incurring of the obligations, as well as the city retainage of administrative expenses. For the TIF plan revenue, the TIF plan also sets a budget for revenues, and you can see that the total amount of TIF revenue is equivalent to the total amount of project costs, again, at just shy of $4.9 million. So again, this is a TIF plan that is based on providing maximum flexibility as it relates to the future use of TIF within the district. So we want to create and draft TIF plan projections and TIF plan assumptions that allow for maximum flexibility while still being reasonable in the assumptions that we used. Does not mean that a total of $4.9 million will be used or captured by the district or spent by the district. It is just giving the district and the city council the authority to use up to those amounts in the future as they see fit. So for tonight, the next steps, if you are so inclined, would be to approve the resolution creating the TIF district, and then at a later date, the proposed development agreements. In this case, we might actually have two development agreements will be brought back before the city council for your future consideration as it relates to the actual entering into obligations authorized or for which the TIF district provides the authority. With that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Any questions of the council? Go ahead, Anthony.
So I got a couple of questions. Obviously, how do we verify the income? A number of the units have to get sold to people obviously on a medium or below medium income. How do we kind of verify that, going forward? And then where does the medium income come from? Who kind of sets that as a number?
You want to answer where the medium income comes from, and then I'll tell the council how we get the reporting.
Yeah, the median income information comes from, so the state statute that identifies a piece of language within IRS mortgage code that then points back to the specific median income of a community, which is then identified via searching through the HUD database and census information. So the amount is references a couple different laws that ultimately points back to a HUD census database. That is where I was able to pull the median income information from.
Okay, and then on the reporting side of it, the finance department, we receive that reporting annually from our housing TIF district. So we have forms that we send out and have them fill that out, and then they verify that for us. So for instance, under existing districts, before we make a payment out to that developer, they have to provide that reporting to us before we're authorized to let that payment go.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
So how does it work when you're going to sell some of these? Because obviously the district is the district, and then a number of these units are going to get sold, and then a number obviously are going to get retained as rental. So is the ones that get sold, do the people that buy them have do they benefit, or does that money go back to the developer?
Well,
Or is it adjusted on a pro rata basis?
Well, so twofold. The rental portion of this, that certainly the TIF would go to the developer then, because they would be the owner. What we're looking at, and this is what you'll see when we come back with the development agreement, is that the city will actually finance the infrastructure improvements, so we'll bond for that, put in the street, the water, the sewer, the storm, and then we're going to use these TIF revenues, and we'll actually keep them in-house and use that to make the bond payments. Now, that sounds very simple on the face of it, but we are working hard to get the mechanics of that all to work, because we'll be assessing for these so that the city has the guarantee of that if TIF is not generated, well then whoever owns that property will be paying those assessments to make our bond payments. But when the increment comes in, we'll use that to replace those assessments, and thus keeping that in-house. So it's the first owner, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first owner, when you sell those, that has to be income qualified. If they get sold subsequent to that, then we don't check on that reporting.
Yeah.
We'll get the reporting then on the rental units though,
Right.
throughout the life.
But it's a good point, all the taxes are collected and then they're divvied out.
Yep.
So the future owners of the properties don't get the taxes. They all pay their taxes, just
Yeah.
they're obligated, those taxes are obligated to us, right? I think that's a good question, Anthony. Other questions for Tom before we, go ahead, Justin.
Maybe just want to follow up on Anthony's question. So those assessments that are on the property, first owner sells it to a second owner. Are those assessments paid in full on that sale, or do they carry on with the second owner?
Another very good question, things we've been talking through. They stay with the property. So, at the time of the sale and their purchase agreement, if they were to pay them off, but the assessments will stay, but with the goal that the TIF over the life of this district will pay those assessments. So those owners won't be paying those assessments. And that's the argument, is that the infrastructure now is so expensive to put in thus the need for the TIF to do that, so. But the assessments will always be there until they are paid off annually with TIF.
And, okay, does that answer your question?
Thank you, yes.
And when the development agreement would come back, that's when we would know the breakdown of public improvements versus
Yep.
administrative costs and all those exact details of
Yep.
any,
And then
and the how many years,
long,
how much the city would be
Yeah.
obligated.
Tom is setting this TIF plan at the max with the law, and then, yep, we come back and say, okay, how many years is it and what dollar amount is it?
Sure. Yes, Scott?
Once this TIF plan is approved, if there was a reason to want a bigger number, a larger amount of money, and is that something that's just adjusted in the development agreement, or, because this is just, according to so many parcels and the max amount that you can get for the parcel. So this doesn't really have anything to do with the real cost of what the building is or what it might be, is that? Correct.
This is just the maximum, so it's, then we'll come back with a development agreement that will set it within these boundaries.
Right.
But we can't make this be more, unless it was a completely different development that would have a different value. But for this development that's laid out, for these houses, for these housing units, this is what the value should generate over the life. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, that's correct. The budget that is set here is based on the revenue potential of the district, based on the size of the district, the number of units, and then the market value assumptions, as well as assuming a market value inflation, because typically property tends to inflate in value over time. The development agreement is going to come back with likely to be a much smaller budget amount for actual obligations, which should hopefully allow the district to pay that back faster and then be in place for a shorter period of time than the full 26 years. But to the question of if there was some fundamental change in the size of the project or market values or whatnot, if we wanted to increase the budget from what's being shown here, we would have to go through this full public hearing process again. And that process is about 60 to 90 days of various drafts of the TIF plan have to get sent to the county and the school district, and notifications have to be made and the like. So part of providing the flexibility of having the maximum amount of budget authority within the draft of the TIF plan in front of you tonight is to avoid having to go back and incur the cost and the time of going through that formal modification process. We can always go smaller than the budget that we've shown within the TIF plan, and we likely will, but we can't certainly go up without going through this process again. So that's really one of the main reasons why we set these TIF plans in a manner to provide this flexibility. All the decisions as it relates to every obligation still comes back and is approved by the city council. There's nothing that is allowed that would be done administratively by staff. Everything is still city council required approval, but it avoids the public hearing process and the notifications and the cost and time associated with that.
Thank you. Tom?
So in the packet, we've also got, obviously, this petition. Can we, I mean, I know it's kind of like the last thing, so can we just talk about this kind of now as it all relates to the same thing?
Probably when we finish this hearing, then I think you could move that one
Yeah.
up if you wanted. Is that?
But I'd like, before we vote on the TIF district, I'd like to understand what this actually is.
Sure.
Let's go ahead and open the hearing, then we'll come back
Yep.
and close the hearing. So with that, we will open the public hearing for a TIF district. Establishing tax increment and financing district number 414 within the development district number 4, and approving the tax increment financing plan. If anyone from the public would like to speak to that issue, please step to the lectern, state your name. Anyone? Hearing no one, we will close the public hearing. Now it's back to the council. We'll need a resolution on that, but before, if you want to, I think it's appropriate that we can bring up the new business item number 2.
As they're interrelated,
Yeah.
I would just like to understand what this actually is or means.
Brian, did you want to speak to your memo on item number 2 on the under new business?
Yeah, certainly. Good evening, Your Honor and members. Yes, Councilmember Hicks is correct. This petition before your new business item is in regards to the Campus View Estates development. The property owner now, the fee title ownership of this property has requested a 100% petition for the installation of city sanitary sewer, water main, lateral services, and permanent stormwater facilities. These city services would serve Block 1, lots 1 through 9, Blocks 2, lots 1 through 14, and Block 3, lots 1 through 4 of the Campus View Estates plat. And I believe that I do have an exhibit also in your packet too of this plat that's later on in the agenda for final approval. This is a standard petition that meets Minnesota Statute 429. If acceptable, myself and Interstate Engineering will prepare the preliminary engineering report and the estimated project costs and method of special assessment for consideration at the future preliminary hearing. I believe this project will be done in 2 phases at this time, but just mentioned with this TIF plan before you, this infrastructure is proposed to be funded with general obligation bonds with special assessments and reimbursed through the proposed TIF district. The TIF district you are also taking action on tonight, so I'll open up to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone have any questions on that issue for Brian?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. So with that, let's go back to the resolution on the TIF district.
I'll make that motion, Your Honor.
We have a motion to a resolution
Or sorry.
to establish that TIF district and also to accept the tax increment plan that's been presented. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Caroline. Further questions or comments?
Ben?
Yes, Scott.
I guess I'd like to make some comments generally about the project and whether that happens before or after this. I guess maybe now would be the best time to do it. I'm not going to speak against the idea of the TIF plan. It seems like as a city we want to encourage development, and we're doing the right thing by working with this developer and trying to get a project to move forward. And we've had good experience so far working with this developer and seeing things come together in town, and I'm glad for that. This is, in that, I believe, a good project. I think it's something that we can support as a city. I think it could have been, or could yet be, a better project if there were a couple of things included in it. First of all, this is in what is the RTC Historic District up there. And from what I've seen of the plans so far, there isn't anything to indicate that taking into effect that historical designation and the kinds of things that might make it more fitting with that, it doesn't appear that those things have been taken into account as far as design things, whether it involved matching brick or types of roof lines or types of windows or the kinds of things that might be included. Not that they couldn't be, and that was part of the question that I asked earlier as to, where the numbers would fall if this was a more or less expensive project. My assumption is that trying to do something that would be more fitting with the neighborhood, in my view, would probably be more expensive. And yet, it, again, in my view, would be very worthwhile to move that direction if it was possible to do. Again, another way that this project might have been or might yet be a better project would be if it allowed for some parking for the existing Campus View apartments that are just to the north of this, that currently don't have any underground or garage parking. It seems like that would have been a wise thing to do, given that there's a good chunk of that development that still hasn't been finished, and there'll be a demand for parking up there. It seems like it might have been worth considering going with market value rather than lower income housing in this area, and perhaps even more single family rather than twin home. And those kinds of things I guess I would have liked to have seen in this area in particular. Not that this is a bad project on its face, and it's not right on the front yard, up close to the Kirkbride building, but it's awfully close, and it's within what the Historic District would call the view shed of the RTC building. So to the degree that any of those comments could be taken into account by the developer as to how the final development comes together, I think it's worth hearing those now.
Thanks, Scott.
can any of those be addressed in the developer agreement? As to standards?
Yeah, I think.
You maybe could. The one thing that was coming to mind as we're thinking about this is, yeah, they do need to be a TIF district, it of course has to abide by those income limits.
Mhm.
And if you get the houses too expensive, then those people in those income limits can no longer afford them. So that could, I'm just thinking out loud here, but.
And I think, personally, I don't necessarily disagree. I do have a problem maybe putting design standards on a project after there's substantial investment by the developer. That's my
Sure.
that's
And
my
I-
concern.
If I could follow up, I recognize that, there's been an awful lot of work put into here, and I'm not trying to discount that at all. But again, even those income standards don't apply to 100% of the project. There were breakdowns of 40/60 or 20/50, depending on. And so perhaps the structures that are along Park Street that are facing existing older homes, or relatively newer homes, I should say, maybe could be more like those relatively newer homes, whereas the ones that are facing and more toward the Kirkbride side of things, if they had a more higher-end look, more of an older style with the windows and the finishes, that might fit the neighborhood better. That's the kind of thing, So if you had some more expensive ones and some lesser expensive ones, I think it could still be done in a way that would meet the TIF requirements for a lower income. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Before we call for the vote, other questions or comments? Roll call.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Tillman.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. As long as we've discussed, let's go ahead and entertain a resolution accepting the petition for the Campus View Estates that Brian spoke about. Someone like to offer that resolution?
Your Honor.
Thank you, Justin.
I'll second.
Thank you, Krista. Brian, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and also to initiate those public improvements as well.
Initiate the public improvements, part of the resolution. Justin, Krista, that
Yep.
part of the resolution? Got
Yes,
it?
sir.
Any questions on that? Roll call, please.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Tillman.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Under the consent agenda this evening, we have 8 items. If anyone, yes, Tom, thank you for being here. We'll see you when we discuss the developers agreement. Thanks, Tom.
Definitely, thank you. I appreciate your time. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Tom. Moving on to the consent agenda. Tonight, there are 8 items. If anyone wants to discuss any of them individually, we will remove them. Seeing none, I would entertain a resolution approving the consent agenda as presented.
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Krista.
I'll second.
Thank you, Caroline. Roll call, please.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Tillman.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Under ordinance and resolutions, tonight we have the first reading of ordinance 13, 8th series, public nuisances. We just need someone to entertain that.
I'll offer that in.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. And we have a second reading of ordinance 17, 8th series, amending the zoning map from R1 to R4 from campus addition as requested by Prairie View Development.
I'll offer that.
Been to committee.
Just need a roll
Thank you.
call.
We're just going to need a roll call. Yep, we've been to committee and discussed. If there's any questions, we'll direct them to our city attorney. Roll call, please.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Tillman.
Yes.
That ordinance is approved. Item number 3 is a resolution accepting Houston Engineering's professional services proposal for public improvement 9771, which is the Fergus Falls closed landfill cell, in the amount of $72,011, and authorizing staff to initiate the egress negotiations with property owners. We'll call on Brian Ybarra. Good evening, Brian.
Hey, good evening, Your Honor and members. Yes, this was presented to the last committee as a whole in regards to the ongoing Fergus Falls landfill SW184 updates. where we've gone through all the testing and work plan. The PCA is requesting the city install 2 additional nested sentinel monitoring wells on the prescribed map, which are generally located due west and northwest of the closed landfill SW Wayne 84. I believe there was a question at the time of the committee about delaying this project. I have made a request to that, but I have not heard yet back a response. So I'll just open up to any questions you might have.
Is there a timing on this, or would it be, if we waited 2 weeks, would that delay the project sufficiently? I think it'd be nice to know the response from Houston Engineering on
The only timing, I believe, just like anything with the BCA, they always generally give you 60 days to respond with any issuance, they issue on theirs. The only thing with timing is we kind of have prearranged, it'd still be canceled, Trout Wells mobilizing to get these wells done, completed this fall. That could provide, just like anything with materials. I would have to check on that as well. Probably not so from the PCA, it's more scheduling the subcontractor to get this work completed this fall.
So 2-week delay would still allow us to get the delay get the work done this fall if the council so chose?
I would have to check with them, but I believe we can make that.
Sure.
We can check.
Can we not approve it subject to, knowing how the agency works?
Sure.
Yeah, that was my question is do we really expect to hear back from them in a timely manner in 2 weeks?
It's generally out of my control.
Yeah.
I mean, can we approve it subject to the agency?
Someone like to offer
I made
that
that.
subject to that's what I hear from council.
Your Honor, what we're asking the agency is whether or not we can delay the project, like not do it this year and do it down the road, I think is what Councilmember Kwami's concern was. So if we're going to approve this, we're approving spending this money and moving forward with the
Right.
project. So I don't know what condition we would be waiting on for the PCA.
Yeah, if I may, I just want to remind people that this project, since its inception, that we started over a year ago, this is funded through the Post-Closure Assurance Fund for SW 184. And if I believe there we have approximately $3.1 million that is set aside for the post-closure care of this facility. And every year, if approved by the PCA, which this particular and everything leading up to this project has been approved to draw against. So any cost incurred by the city is to draw against that assurance fund. And this is primarily what it's dedicated. It's primarily for not only the grounds, but also updating the plume extents and everything, what we're doing, which has not been done since the initial post-closure. So I think it's reasonable that we're doing this work just for assurance. But just want to remind people that that's where these funds are coming from.
I would offer that resolution to accept the proposal.
Thank you.
I would second that, Your Honor.
Thank you. Justin, any further comments or just?
And just to add to that comment, I think they'd maybe let us delay it, but they certainly aren't going to allow us to not do it. So,
And it's not going to get any cheaper the longer we leave it.
Yes, Scott.
I could just make this comment would be, I didn't expect to see it delayed, and I expect that it will go forward. But I felt that it was at least worth the making the point, basically as my pushback against bureaucracy. Because in this case, it just seems like the MPCA is finding a way to keep themselves busy and keep money kind of churning through the system, and it just seems unnecessary. There was no evidence from what was presented to us before that this was any kind of immediate danger, that we had any kind of a risk that required spending $70,000 right now. I think that if we didn't spend this for a year or two or even 5, from what was presented to us before, it wouldn't make any difference. And so this just seems to be a way for them to keep their jobs and to keep people busy creating stuff to do. But since we've got $3 million to spend and it's going to get spent, whether I think it's smart or not, I think it'll just go forward.
Your Honor.
Your Honor,
However,
Can I just say one thing? Not to put the pressure on Councilmember Kwame, but because of our lack of members this evening, we need 5 votes in the affirmative for anything to move forward if it's a resolution. So you could single-handedly stop the project this evening, and if you wish, but I just wanted to make everybody aware of the fact that we have a 5-vote threshold on resolutions, and so you are probably from the sounds of the discussion on Wednesday, the determining vote. So no pressure, but
No, and I
sort of
recognize
be
that as
fully
we were
transparent.
doing the opening roll call here. I thought, that'd be interesting. But on the other hand, again, we've got the money to do it. It's something that'll eventually happen. As Anthony said, it won't get any cheaper. I think that it's just worth paying attention to these kinds of things, because if bureaucracy just kind of keeps cranking itself along, at some point you got to say, is that really worth it?
Next year at the ballot box, you have the opportunity to change that.
Scott, in
On
all
a
honesty,
state
thank you for your
basis.
reasonableness. Thank you for understanding the
And,
situation.
and to the degree that we can play nice with them and they don't ask for 3 wells instead of 2 and push for other restrictions, well, okay.
They might still do that. Believe me.
All right, so, any further questions?
Your Honor, if I may, I just want to note, I do have an email here from our hydrologist from the Solid Waste Division for our particular landfill. We do have a new hydrologist, and it has been, for lack of better terms, a little bit getting her acclimated with our complicated site. But they requested this back in March of this year. So we've had a lot of discussions about, going back and forth on what they're requesting as far as additional testing and everything. So it's a pretty good compromise, I can say, at the least right now for both parties.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for the work on this. Roll call, please.
Armisen.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number 4 is a resolution accepting Bolton and Manx Professional Services Agreement for Construction Administration in the amount of $98,000 for Public Improvement 5333, and we'll again call on our city engineer, Brian Ybarra.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, this too as well was presented at the last committee of the whole. I did have, yes, we're requesting accepting Bolton Manx Professional Services Agreement in the amount of $98,000 for construction administration. I did recently have an edit that I presented at the last council meeting, and the contractor, Central Specialties, is requesting a delay of this project. Contract documents is to substantial completion in November this fall. However, based on a lot of varying material availability, primarily things made out of PVC, polyvinyl chlorides, amongst a lot of things, the supply is getting very limited, and based on the complexity of this project and the locale, they're requesting a delay of this project to change order. We can do this via change order to start it as soon as road restrictions are done, 2022, with completion of July 30th, 2022. So at this time, I'm requesting to accept Bolton Manx Professional Services Agreement and authorization for me to allow to execute a change order with Central Specialties, thereby changing the contract dates for final completion of July 2022.
Thank you, Brian. Someone like to offer that resolution?
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Caroline.
I'll second
Thank you,
that, Your Honor.
Justin. Questions? Roll call, please.
Armisen.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
The resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Brian. Item number 5 is a resolution approving a modification to the developers agreement for the Westridge addition plat. And I'll call on our city administrator, Andrew Bremseth.
Yeah, thank you, Honor. Council members. We recently entered into a development agreement with the owner of the Westridge Mall as it relates to the most recent replat. And what that development agreement was for was to ensure that each of these separate parcels would have their own utility services and also would have the required firewalls as per building code. The owner of the mall has been very cooperative and fully intends to do that, but he has made it known that contractor availability has slowed things down for him. He is in a purchase agreement to sell the parcels that were included in the latest replat. And the way the development agreement currently reads is that no transactions or sale of the property can occur before this work is complete. In order to not hold up that closing, he is asking the city to approve a modification to that development agreement, which would require the work to still be done, but it would take place after the transaction were to occur. I listed the 4 conditions in which the owner of the mall agreed to, which I believe are adequate securities for the city. They have agreed that they will provide signed contracts between Westridge Mall and all contractors needed to complete the work. And in those contracts will be a completion date of July 1st next year or sooner. They have agreed to provide a signed contract between Westridge Mall and Interstate Engineering, whereas Interstate Engineering will serve as project manager and administer the contracts, essentially ensuring that the work happens. They will also provide evidence of an escrow account that will hold the sum of 110% of the total contracts, which we'll have that are signed, ensuring there's enough money for Interstate and contractors to be made whole on the work. And then finally, we've asked that they provide a agreement from the potential buyer or the soon-to-be new owner of the property acknowledging that they understand that this work has to be completed and on which schedule we're agreeing to, so they would comply with that as well. So, given these circumstances, we're asking that the council approve this modification to the development agreement. The transaction will likely take place, and then the work would be done, I believe, as early as next spring, with a guaranteed completion sooner than July 1st of 2022.
Thank you, Andrew. With that, would someone like to offer that resolution?
I'll offer that, and I have a question.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. Second, Justin. Thank you, Justin. Go ahead, Scott.
The question would be, what's the case if it's a default, the construction work isn't done by July 1st, then what happens?
Good question.
We just go out there and we say, no, you guys hurry up. We want you done.
Alex, do you want to talk about what that would look like as the person administering the work and the contract?
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. That's a great question that I don't know that I have a great answer to. Typically, all the contracts would include a liquidated damages in order to incentivize the contractor to finish on time. We currently have quotes from 2 of the 3 contractors. We need the third one. We had a quote from, had to make some modifications, and so they're looking to get back to us. Most of this work is looking to be done through the winter. I think July 1st is a conservative completion date. The one piece, there's some digging in the parking lot that'll have to take place in the spring, but a couple of them want to get rolling yet, maybe even as early as this month. It's just that schedules don't allow to have completion done by, I think the closing is set for the end of September. So, yeah, that would be probably something to be negotiated between the current owners and the future owner as to what remedy because I would assume the city would not issue a permit for occupancy for this new tenant before this work was completed. So the new buyer would be held up and would be incentivized then to try to make that work, get that work completed. Some of this, a chunk of this work is also being done inside the mall, which will affect their ability to do the remodel projects that I'm sure they will need because some of this is unfinished space currently. So they, certainly the buyer and who will not at that time be the owner will be incentivized to make sure that this is taken care of as well.
So it sounds like the short answer is we can hold up their occupancy permit until they are done.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that was in the original
Yes.
development agreement, is those requirements that everything get done before any occupancy agreements would be issued. So
Okay.
The hope is to be able to schedule the work such that their remodel project and this project kind of coexist very nicely together, and we can get things done as quickly as possible and have them rolling well before that July 1st date, of course.
I think it's terrific that there's some action out there on the mall. I think people would be very pleased to see some things, changing and improving. And I'd love to see this go forward. I just didn't want to leave us without any leverage at the end.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Scott. Any other questions for Alex or the city attorney or Andrew? Roll call, please.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Tonight, we have claims in the amount of $3,086,296.37. And I would entertain a resolution to pay the bills.
I will offer that.
Thank you, Krista.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Caroline. Any questions, we'll direct them to our finance director. Roll call, please.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Under Board, Committee, and Department reports, tonight we have a presentation from the Heritage Preservation Commission. We'll call on Mr. R.C. Drews to give us a presentation on improvements proposed or suggested to the broken down dam. Good evening, R.C.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, and staff. Thank you for having us here tonight. I know that it was a little bit of a dense agenda, and I know there was a little bit of confusion getting us on. I think there was some concern that this might be a repeat presentation of what we had in March, so I thought maybe I would open with an understanding of the impetus for why I'm here. It'll help me understand, too. We were here in March for the Heritage Preservation Commission to present to the council our plans for this year, 2021. We thought that it was important both that the council be aware of the work of the commissions and that the commissions themselves have some accountability to the council, because if we have spoken to the council, spoken to the public, and stated that these are our intentions, hopefully that encourages us to get some work done. So during that presentation, one of the things that we discussed was improvements to the broken down dam site. And we have a project in mind for the Heritage Preservation's Commission, but we thought, it is sort of a club. We thought that maybe there was more opportunity for that site, and if there is greater opportunity, it is beyond the scope of the HPC, so it was an invitation to the council. The mayor accepted an invitation to visit the site and see some of this in person, and during that conversation requested that the HPC put together a list of recommendations that the council could peruse at their leisure and decide if any of this is of interest. So that is the reason why I'm here, is to present that list for your consideration and nothing more. You should have, hopefully, a copy of our list of recommendations. It was included with the council packet, though it was a late edition. We have these in order of severity, effectively, with the upper category being critical, followed by recommended, and the final category being site enhancement. These really are just opportunities in the final category, things that maybe if there is an appetite, for example, that there's a lot of work going on with Otter Tail Power in that area because of the Hoot Lake Solar Plant. If there are opportunities for collaboration and there's an appetite to take this beyond some of the necessary improvements, these are other things that we had as considerations. So this list is based on conversations of HPC members. It's also based on interviews with users of that site. One of the things that's been fascinating to me is to learn how many people are using Broken Down Dam site on a regular basis. In fact, I was there yesterday taking the photos that we'll see in a second here, and well, you can see just a bit of the parking lot, but there were about 8 to 10 cars depending on the time that I was there, and a total of about 20 people using the site on Labor Day. So it surprised me. It's been a good opportunity to speak to some of those individuals, learn how they are using the site, and learn what would most interest them to see there as people who are actually using that site rather than just an outsider projecting my assumptions onto that site. So these first couple of photos, and I'll make sure that my keyboard works here. Maybe it doesn't. Did I broke it?
Might need to turn it on.
Oh, the power switch on it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Isn't that the age-old IT rule to turn it off and back on again? Backside?
Just slam it on the ground.
Then we'll get a new
Appears to
one
be
that
super glue
works.
on the, Well, I don't see it. Otherwise, Lynn, would you mind? Yeah, yep. It should, if you just go left and right on the arrow keys, it should skip from the first picture to the next picture. For Park Region, can we just get some Jeopardy music playing over this? I think that's royalty free now. It's been on a long time.
Will the arrows work now?
Yep. Okay. All right. So these first couple of pictures here, we have just views of the parking lot there, which is maybe a gracious term. One of the things that I found challenging with these photos is that cameras don't always give the best perception of depth. So we have, as an example, a common family sedan to give us some sense of what the depth of some of these potholes are. You can see clearly, given the ground clearance on that vehicle, that if it makes it in that pothole, it does not make it out of that pothole. The greater challenge being with some of the rain that we've had in the last couple of days, these potholes are filled with water up to the top, and you cannot, as you're entering this site, see what you're about to drive into until you're already stuck in it. So we would recommend as one of the critical needs for the site that there be some sort of resurfacing that takes place that may have to include bringing in material to fill in some of these holes. I think that it's been allowed to deteriorate as such that we may or may not be able to just blade it flat again in one pass, but I think it would be a substantial improvement to the site. Lynn, if I could ask for the next one. Thank you. And note that every one of those comes with a please and a thank you. So likewise, it's been challenging to photograph some of the stairways that are at Broken Down Dam to try to give a sense of the altitude change that we're experiencing here. What I can say is this is one of the first set of stairs that you'll encounter on the west path of Broken Down Dam, and the hills that are beside these stairs are as steep or steeper than the stairs that you're seeing there. But there's nothing to prevent anyone from rolling down the side of them. They're a little bit of, it's appreciated that stairs were installed, but they're a little bit precarious and it limits the number of people that have access to this site. This is something, as we mentioned in March, that the HPC is looking at as a project that we think we can take on. We do have communication already with the school district and one of the shop teachers there who believes this would be a project for his construction class. That's starting this next February, so it'll be several months until we hear the results of that. But hopefully this is something we can take on. And Lynn, if you don't mind, there are two more on. There's just a different set of stairs. Again, it's a very steep change in elevation, and it would be nice to have a little bit of a handhold to allow accessibility. And there's one more, I think, picture of stairs. This was something that we actually just noticed when we were out on Friday, but there is a series of rebar that was used to hold these stairs in place, and they're on the front face of these steps. And if you do step wrong, they're a heck of a way to skin up the back of your leg. So whether or not that's something that needs to be addressed, like all of this list, is up to the council's discretion, but just a consideration that we wanted to point out. If I could ask for the next one, please. So the next topic is debris removal. I think we just talked about an ordinance on public nuisance. I don't know what constitutes on the grounds of city parks, but I have a suspicion that if that's applicable on municipal property, this might qualify. We have a series of photos here. If you want to maybe just scroll through some of this one, actually, I'll point out it's a little difficult with any of this to discern in photos, even if we had a bigger screen. Unfortunately, rusted barbed wire looks an awful lot like tree branches in a picture. But what you can see at the bottom left corner, all the way to the far distance of that photo, is fencing wire, rolled up in bunches and accumulated in piles. There's a few car parts in there, appliances and random others, but largely it is rusted out fencing material. It's quite a haven for tetanus, I suspect. My understanding is that what happened decades ago is there was a salvage yard nearby that they had a tendency to run their loose metal goods off the edge of this, a little bit of a cliff there that's created a pocket. And there are about 3 sites that look like this. If I could ask for the next one, please. And the next one. And the next one. And the next one. And the next one. One more, I think. Okay, and one more. Thank you, Lynn. There's a couple of cars out here. I mentioned this at our last presentation. I didn't have very clear photos of them because they're very inaccessible. I found means of access yesterday. I wouldn't recommend it. My understanding is that this car is from about the 1930s, and I'd wager it's been in that exact spot for almost that long. There was a license plate nearby that said 1933. Tried to take pictures of the dash, tried to take pictures of the front. I can't find who made it, but if there are any car collectors out there that are interested, maybe you want to get in touch with City Hall. Might be an opportunity. If I could ask for the next picture, please. And one more, I think. Okay, yeah, there's the front of it, if you recognize it.
That one does not look licensed and operable.
Interestingly, most of the mechanics seem to have been removed from a lot of the vehicles there. So again, whether that was the work of the salvage yard or people decades after, I'm not certain what the story is. Nice little machine, I'm sure, at the time. But we recommend for safety purposes that if it's possible, these objects be removed. There are appliances, there are vehicle frames, there's barbed wire, all of it covered in rust. I will mention that it's going to be difficult to access if it's something that the council pursues. I don't know what the best way to go about that would be, but that would hopefully be the work of well-qualified contractors to discern how to go about that task. So the next thing we have under safety is path maintenance. The biggest reason being that the paths are so narrow because they appear to be created only by the users walking back and forth through there, and it doesn't appear to be any maintenance that's taking place on these paths. As such, we have quite a bit of wood ticks, deer ticks, and poison ivy that are available any day you like on that site. Now, this is one of the first paths. This is leading up to the broken down dam itself. And with the exception of the paths through the woods, it's about as wide as it gets. This isn't bad, but Lynn, if I could ask for the next one, please. Okay, now we're just a little bit far again. This is the main path through broken down dam, but you can see that there's no way to move through this without picking up, on average, about 6 to 12 wood ticks. At least that's been my experience. If I could ask for the next one. Now, this is still the main path. Even on a better display, I don't think you'd be able to find it in there. It is in there, I promise you, but it's largely invisible, at least for our purposes. And there's one more photo, if I could ask Lynn. This is just adjacent. I tried to highlight this so it shows up real well. I'm not a botanist, but I do believe that's poison ivy. At least that's what I've been told. There's quite a fair crop of it. I don't know if it has any medicinal properties, but it's not good for me as far as I've experienced. So just another reason if we could expand that path, level it out just a little bit, and maybe if there's an opportunity to have city staff once a month or something go out and keep that so it's at least one person wide. If I could ask for the next one. Removal of downed trees. This, I believe, is a beech, and it was quite a striking tree in its day, but now it's laying sideways. And I've noticed in the last couple of days that users to that site have been kind enough to break off the upper mast of the tree so that you can kind of squeak alongside the right there. But generally speaking, that's blocking the entirety of the path. There are not only this tree, but there are several trees that are braced against other trees throughout the woods around Broken Down Dam, and should one of those choose to let loose, it comes with complications, I guess, if anyone's present at the time. So to what extent it's viable to remove all that waste, that would be at the council's discretion, but I think from a public safety standpoint, there would be benefit to at least rolling some of those trees over into the woods where they can't land on people. If I could ask for the next one. Now, this tree is about 70 to 80 feet tall, at least by my estimation, and laying down on the ground looking up at the thing, I couldn't get the top of it. So suffice it to say, it's a very big tree. And if I can get the next tree, the next picture, please, which is a tree. You can see the base of the tree, kind of. I don't know if this is the work of beavers or if this is just time slow decay, but this 75-foot tree, which is about 1 foot off of the main path, right next to the river, can't be long for this world. It's a fairly severe gouge in the thing, and it's clearly decaying, and I don't know when it will come down exactly, but it might be in the best interest to have it removed safely before it removes itself. If I could ask for the next one, please. So we have a couple of photos here relating to the graffiti at the site. We mentioned this in March. Now, I've heard varying reports from users of the site that some of them greatly appreciate the beauty of some of this graffiti and the way it enhances the area. Others less so. And I think it also depends on the graffiti in particular. But what we had recommended as part of this list specifically was there is some graffiti at the site that I think generally we could say would be unacceptable for public consumption. In fact, we'll have a couple of those coming up here, but you'll see that they've been completely censored out because we probably can't show that on TV tonight. So if I could get the next one, please. And the next one as well. And one more. Okay, and I just wanted to make an observation here on this site. When I was down, as I said yesterday, there were a number of users there to the site and seemed to be reasonably enjoying it. I've tried to censor this gentleman out so we can still see somebody climbing without identifying who this individual is. But what I've always wondered is how that graffiti makes it all the way up there on that middle section, because it would be an awkward thing to scale across the top of Broken Down Dam in its current state. And what I learned yesterday is that there's a rope that you can climb up right next to that corner there. And you can access those locations, and whether people are diving off the top, I don't know. But one thing that we did observe at the site is, and that's very difficult to see probably from your distance, but there are 2 steel poles jutting out of the water there at the base, right next to where that rope begins. It would be a heck of a thing to fall on. So not only a mention about the graffiti, but just as regards public safety, this is how people are interacting with this site, whether or not that's something that the city is comfortable with, whether or not it's a liability issue, I don't know. But something to be considered as we look at possibilities for Broken Down Dam. If I could ask for the next one, please. Okay, so this one, and actually if I could ask for the next one too. We have a little bit of more censoring here that has taken place for the sake of public consumption. Suffice it to say, there's a fun word that starts with the same letter as flowers that's written on these bridges. And it's probably the same sort of thing that we could agree that the general public is not going to prefer their kids come out and see. If we want to make this site more accessible to the public, this, under the critical recommendations, is the type of graffiti that we're recommending be removed. And I think that could be as simple as a pressure washer, so it should be fairly low cost. If I could ask for the next one, please. Okay. So now moving down to the recommended section, we're recommending a series of signage for Broken Down Dam, and I've just got a photo of the main parking area and the entrance to the dam, which is one of the areas that we'd recommend for some of the signage. Firstly, we recommended a sign describing the site's important history to include photos. Those would be available at the Historical Society, and my understanding is the Historical Society would be willing to partner with the city on that. We do actually have a historic context background that was written for this site when it was acknowledged as a local historic landmark just a few months ago. That content could be repurposed for a sign, so it would be very low cost, very low effort to put up some kind of information on what Broken Down Dam is and what it means to the city's history, as well as what it means to Otter Tail Power's history. Related there too, I think it would be prudent and useful if we could have signage right at the entrance here that indicates the West Trail, so that people visiting the site, especially from out of town, know where to go to view Broken Down Dam, because you drive up and you see these cross arms blocking off the paths, blocking them off to vehicles, but it's not clear if you're supposed to be on this property or if this was something that was open 20 years ago and we don't let people in anymore. So if there was an opportunity to put up some signage, again, that just gives a direction, could go as far as a map showing you are here this many miles to the dam site or something greater, but again, all of that would be at the consideration of the council. And tied therein, the establishment date of Broken Down Dam, which, as we understand, thanks to Lynn and one of the gentlemen in the city's GIS department, we believe to be April 11th, 1896, which is fascinating because that's 13 years before Broken Down Dam broke down. So what the context was, since the dam had not been built at that time, I'm not certain why it was designated as a city park, if that date is correct, but I think it would be interesting to a lot of people to know that the site is that old, if that is the correct date. If I could get the next page, please. So, related to the site's history is this structure here, which if you've been to Broken Down Dam, you've probably seen and wondered exactly what and why this is. And I don't know that I have the exact answer to that, but we believe that that is the remains of the Page Mill. Henry G. Page was a tragic figure in the city's early history. He had a great rise and he had a great fall. And part of that occurred right here on the Otter Tail River, which was several years prior to the building of Broken Down Dam. Interestingly and incidentally, this dam was also built partially with the help of Prince Albert Honeycutt, who we've recognized as being a significant contributor to the city's history. So it would be nice and appreciated, again, on the recommended list, to have a historic plaque at that site recognizing the Page Mill and what it meant, how it was built, and when it failed. And let's see, if I could have the next page, please. So we're back to the parking lot. This is related to the resurfacing mentioned under the critical list, but we have it under the recommended here because, well, we think it's critical that this be resurfaced so that it's safely drivable for visitors to the site. We think that it would be a wonderful thing if there was an opportunity to install some sort of indication of parking here, because as you can see, it's a little bit of a free-for-all. When the site gets busy, it gets very difficult to navigate around the potholes, especially in a vehicle with lower clearance. So were there an opportunity to level that and expand that, possibly all at the same time? I've had many people from out of town ask me as they drive in, where am I supposed to park out here? It'd be nice if there was some indication of where that should be. And if I could get the next one, please. Okay, one of the final ones here, we've got enhancement of the picnic area. This, as you can see, is today the picnic area. It is one table, it is chained to the tree so it doesn't escape, and it's been cut in half to be used for firewood. It's covered in graffiti, it is etched with other vulgarities that are not covered by the graffiti, and there seems to be an interesting back and forth that takes place between one group of people that wants to cover it in all kinds of slanderous vulgarities and another group of people who wants to cover those up. I don't think either is city staff, but it would be wonderful if this could be a fine representation of that site instead of something that people are concerned about sitting on. So what we had as a recommendation is consideration for an expanded picnic area, whether that is at the existing site, which is a large and level plain, could easily house 4 picnic tables if there was an appetite for that, and of course replacing that picnic table, or whether that was at a different site. For what it's worth, from user feedback, what I've heard is that a lot of the people that visit the site would be more interested in having a picnic area closer to the dam so that they can view the dam and the river rather than the more remote site that we have right now. But we're just here to bring a list of considerations. If I could have the next one, please. This one was difficult to capture, and I don't know that I've succeeded. But this is on the east side of the trail, and Councilman Kwame, I think you may or may not remember this hill. There's a fairly severe dip that takes you down at about a 40-degree pitch. And it's a matter of shimmying sideways to make it down. And I think it's safe to say that many of the people that could safely access this site, despite the lack of handrails on the stairs, may find this challenging even if they can navigate the stairways. So what we have is a recommendation. Again, this is under the recommended section, not critical. But if it would be possible to fill this in and make it a little more level, there would be a further consideration needed for drainage, a culvert that would need to take place from one side to the other, because much of that has been washed through by erosion. So if I could get the next one, please. Okay. And the next one is related to this one as well. And the next one's related as well. Okay, thank you. We have just a group of site enhancement opportunities at the end here. We talked about a designated dock access area for inner tubes, kayaks, and other watercrafts, designated swimming and resting area. And I've chosen this picture in particular for that point in particular, because what I've heard consistently speaking to people that use Broken Down Dam site is that this is where they swim. It's right on the front east face of the dam, so that would be the upstream side of the dam. And there's a little bit of a pool there. It's not particularly deep, but it's an excellent place for kids and family, and there's nothing particularly risky to cut yourself on, etc. And it seems to be the most used area of the site, what people are visiting it for. It would be wonderful if there was a picnic table there, for example, a small garbage can there. My understanding is that that property across the river, which is not accessible by foot otherwise, to the exception of the residents of that part of town. But my understanding is that there is an individual in that area that is maintaining that property and that has even installed garbage cans that I don't believe are the property of the city, or at least so I've been told. Whether or not there's an opportunity to collaborate with that individual to increase maybe some of the care that's being done on the north side, or whether it's a city staff opportunity, I'm not certain, but I've heard repeatedly that it would be appreciated if there was a more designated swimming area there, as well as a more designated fire pit, maybe to diminish some of the opportunity fires that are being created all across the trail and throughout the woods. And then if I could get the next one, please. So one of the things that we had suggested as far as opportunities for this site is that we do have the 150th anniversary of the city coming up next year, and I do happen to sit on the 150th committee, and we're looking for projects that can collaborate with that to highlight 150 years of Fergus Falls, the coming city of the Northwest. And so we suggested that maybe now is the time for the council to consider improvements to Broken Down Dam as part of that 150th celebration, something that perhaps we could collaborate with the newspaper to get recognition for some of those projects and increase interest in the public to what is a historic landmark in our city. And actually quite a beautiful site if you have the opportunity to see it from the right angle at the right time of day. If I can get the next photo, please. This surprised me. A little incentive. It turns out the Broken Down Dam is home to a healthy crop of lady slippers, our state flower, something that I've personally never seen growing in Fergus Falls before, but I can tell you that there are several patches of them out there, although they are dead at this time and have been for a couple of months. They're quite beautiful around June and July, and it may be something else that we can emphasize as to the significance of the site, Fergus Falls. If I could get the next one too as well. Okay. And so finally, under opportunities, we talked about the graffiti earlier. We mentioned that some of it is probably objectionably vulgar and needs to be covered up, but some of it is a subject of interpretation, whether it's beautiful or not. We've talked on the HPC as to what the best way would be to remove some of that graffiti if the city wanted to consider that. And one of the ideas that we had that we wanted to bring to the council was the opportunity for some sort of public arts campaign whereby there could be sort of a contest to do street art effectively on Broken Down Dam. There's a large, community of street artists in Mexico that work on stone and concrete structures like this and design very beautiful things. And I think that Broken Down Dam could be one of those opportunity sites if that's a way to effectively work with the graffiti that's being done, while giving a group some ownership of the work on that site to maybe help increase the number of people that are viewing it and thus keeping eyes on it, because of course it is remote to the city and it's not practical to ask staff to be out there 24/7 or law enforcement to be constantly patrolling it. So increased citizen presence hopefully means reduced risk of incidents out there. So it was a lot. I thank you for your patience, and if you have any questions, I will be just thrilled to entertain them.
Thanks, RC. And we'll definitely take this, and Guy Taylor is attending a family business tonight. He's not here, but when he's back in town, we'll definitely get this report to him. Also, it sounds like the Park Board should be involved in the conversation, and also the Public Arts Commission. So, if anyone has any questions directly for RC, we can entertain them at this time. Otherwise, thank you very much for your work, the work of the Preservation Commission. But I know it's, you're the one who spearheaded this effort to bring this park and its historical significance to our attention. So, thank you for that, and look forward to opportunities to partner within different aspects of the city, the public, the city council, different commissions to do some work out there as part of the 150th. So, thank you, RC.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes,
Scott.
follow up. He kind of identified me in the course of the conversation there, so I thought I'd at least give a little background. I'd been out to Broken Down Dam before, and RC had contacted me last week as we were looking forward to this week's meeting, wondering if I might be interested in just going and taking a look with him on Friday afternoon. So I was out there Friday afternoon with him. And the one picture in particular that came up, we had stopped to
You
look that one
with
over.
the graffiti? That was you that was blocked out?
No, that wasn't me. But, we did talk about those pipes that were sticking out of the water and how if somebody was up there, it would be kind of risky. And sure enough, you get a picture of the guy right up there. That was interesting. But that particular picture that showed the dip, in order to fill and level that, it would require a culvert because of the way there's a drainage through there. And so just to look at what it might take to do some of the things that were suggested, whether it was hauling in material or whatever, it would be a fair amount of effort and cost to do any of the things that have been suggested. And so to that, I would say I would support trying to get something done out there. I think some of the suggestions made for tying in with the 150-year, promotion of the city and kind of the advantage of the historical nature of this place would all be great. Lady Slipper Flowers, fantastic. Whether or what it would take to have the park board include some of these things in the existing budget that they have, I think that would be the appropriate way to, direct something toward this project. I wouldn't necessarily support adding anything to our budget to, grow the park budget, but I think that we could certainly direct some funds this way from what's in there. And I guess Guy is probably the one that would take it from there, and whether within the park board, we need to get the park board and the HBC together so that they can put together a plan to give us something to vote on. That's where it seems to be going next. It's nice to hear something like this, but if we don't get a plan presented saying, let's do this and here's the cost, there's nothing going to happen. So to that end, I guess I'd like to make a motion to give a date so that we can get something moving on it. Can I do that?
Certainly, you can make a motion if you like.
Okay.
Have staff bring back a recommendation of potential
Okay,
costs
given-
and city staff time for the recommendations.
So I'd like to give them some time to put up something, and they're not expecting anything necessarily to happen quickly this fall, you'd mentioned. But if we could give them a couple of months for give them a couple of meetings, the park board must meet monthly, correct? So if by the following their second meeting from now, whatever that would work out calendar-wise, and we gave them 10 weeks from now, then to come to us with some kind of a presentation that would indicate cost and what to be done, then we'd have something to either approve or not.
Thanks, Scott. So there's a motion to ask staff to work with the park board to bring back a recommendation of what may be feasible at Broken Down Dam. Would someone like to second that motion?
I'll second it, Your Honor.
Thank you, Anthony. And does the park board meet the last, is it the last
I couldn't tell you off the
Wednesday?
top of my
It's
head.
Wednesday?
I
Anyway, so
think
end of
Scott mentioned 10 weeks.
10 weeks, so.
Yeah, we'll
after
be
10
about
weeks.
that.
Yep. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, the motion carries. And thank you, RC, thank you, Scott. We have no reports from staff or administrative officers this evening. There's no old or unfinished business. Under new business, we have one remaining item, and that is a resolution approving change orders for public improvement 9768, and we will call on our city engineer, Brian Ybarra.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll try, I just want to give you an update. I'll make this brief, but I'll open up to any questions you might have. Lynn, if you could, little exhibits here. I just want to know that progress on downtown riverfront project is moving quite well. A lot of subsurface work has been completed, such as the foundation for the marketplace structure and all the support underground utilities. I would have to anticipate here in the next week or so, we're getting some structural metal material in there, so that the structure itself should be coming together. So it will change the horizon here in the near future. I just want to note, during the design phase, I received a lot of requests for enhancements to the project. Enhancements usually come at a cost. We did a majority of them through alternates through the project bidding documents. Others were not at the time because we needed more time to evaluate some of these items, of these requests. So in the interim, since the contract's been awarded, we've had time and we've had discussions with Comstock Destruction, the contract award this project. I have 3 enhancements before you right now, and I'll just go through them briefly here, what these 3 enhancements are. Enhancement number 1, vendor utility access proposal. And on this map right here on the screen, this is a plan sheet of the project. This is Union Avenue. This is the marketplace structure. And these little areas, yellow highlights, are additional surface mount utility hookups consisting of a water service, sanitary sewer, and electrical. The intent was for greater access for vendors for future events for this particular west lot. That's estimated about $35,200. Next enhancement, please, which is the brick column archways. One more, please. Yes, we can look right here, just to give you, as bid right now on this lower right, this is the brick archways. There's 2 brick archways located at the entrance of Union and Court Street. They primarily consist of a small pedestal, block pedestal with an extension of a structural steel with the archway spanning between. The proposal request before you is on the top view. This is just an illustration purposes. This is enhancing the existing, but pretty much coming up to the top surface, or top of the archway with all a brick, not a veneer, but a brick stonework with the integrated archway design. That request is approximately $97,012. Like I want to note, that consists of both archways, Union and Court, and then 4 columns each. And then if we can go back up one more, the third enhancement is a rain guard proposal. We worked with the Natural Resources Committee and found an alternative. Once again, this is your plan utility sheet. I apologize, I know it's a little complex, but Union Avenue here. But over on the west side of parking lot, just adjacent to Union, we do have a small green space, and that's where we're proposing to put a rain garden in that particular area to effectively treat a portion of the surface runoff from the parking lot. That amount is $23,166. We're estimating a total of about $155,400. If the council accepts these proposals, we'll procure the necessary materials. So for budgetary, we don't have identified budgeting item for all of these. That's why I'm here right now. But I am proposing, which has been some discussion for proposal number 1, the vendor utility access. We're looking to propose that through the sanitary fund and the water enterprise fund. Proposal number 2, that can be a combination. We may have to bond for a little additional money towards a project or private fundraising. And same thing with enhancement number 3. That amount could be funded through private donations. However, I would say that it is a stormwater improvement for this project, so therefore water quality improvement. So I would say that's also an eligible expense for our stormwater utility fund. So at this time, I'm just requesting authorization to accept these proposals and talk about the funding sources for each.
Thank you. Brian, someone like to offer that?
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
You, Justin?
I'll second.
Second, thank you. Krista? Questions, comments?
I mean, $100,000 seems like a lot for pillars. I mean, as from an extra. I mean, why are we looking at changing it from being brick and then steel to 100% brick for $100,000?
Well, if I may on this one, if I recall during the design development phase, that was initial as proposed with these brick archways all the way to the top. I do want to note I did not. There's also some sconce lighting that's also integrated on both sides of this. But back to the design development or the final design phase, this was as initially proposed. However, in consideration of budget at the time, we scaled back a little bit to what's before you right now in the bidding documents. So effectively, I'm just revisiting what was talked about during the final design phase.
And we do not have that 100,000 in the budget right now. So one, we'd have to change our bonding amount that we're currently going for. And then, I mean, another option would you carry all those costs to the second phase and see how that comes together. But just wanted to be clear, we don't have that 100,000 in the budget right now, so.
Other questions?
I'll just make a comment. I think, not related to this project, other projects that we've done within the community, it seems like we always cut to just get it done. And we look back and wish we'd have done it differently. And I think, you know, it is $100,000, but in the scope of the overall project, it's just like what we just passed out at the landfill. I mean, granted, we don't have a saving account with the money in it, but something I think we should do, and it will enhance and I mean, this is going to be a long-standing part of our community for a long time. I think we just do it right, and it's a small percentage of the overall project cost. And I would be more in favor of spreading that out over into phase 2, and if we can do that.
And that's probably what I would do. I've talked throughout that we may change the bonding amount, but if we're looking at this, we're actually doing our rating conference call tomorrow, so we would only have till the end of the week to change it. And I'm a little apprehensive to change the bonding at this time, so I would probably carry those costs. And then, we have a state bonding request in for the second phase, but we'll see where that comes out. Otherwise, we'll be financing with the second phase too. So a lot of things in the air on phase 2. I mean,
there is, yeah. And these are based off projections we're looking at with the project contingency and where we can save money. We're always looking to save on quantity of those costs on projects as well.
Thank you. Yes, Scott?
I'm in the sign business, so this gets my attention. And I guess the first question would be on the phase 2 side of it. I don't recall seeing any signage proposal, because we haven't really looked at that phase 2 project really at all. But is there an expectation that there would be either similar or not signage in the phase 2 side on that other lot? Whether they're...
Councilmember Quam, I believe there is, not to this extent as far as an archway opening, but there are kiosks, and I'm assuming a signing will be, once we get to final design, I will be coming forward in the near future, because I feel we do have to have those conversations and start the final design of the east side. So that's something we can look to integrate in that project as well.
Well, as Bill mentioned, the possibility of having this, included in what money we put toward the other phase, maybe the signage ends up being a package that kind of covers both phases. That might be one way to look at it if it was, pushed to paying for it in the next go-round, so to speak. And just for the reality of being in the sign business, if you ordered this sign from our company today, you wouldn't see it till Christmas anyway, because we're swamped. So when you go to actually getting this done with somebody, it's not going to get built till next summer anyhow. So if we were to delay the payment on it and all that stuff to next year's bonding deal, fine. I think that would work fine with the reality of things.
And just so you're aware, the pre-design costs and everything, part of those are on West Block, part of it on East Block. So we are carrying costs that are going to the East Block that are, all the design that's been done so far on on the phase 2, we're carrying those as well. So, I mean, that's just, so you can see how it is one large project broken into 2 phases. So certainly we're carrying costs now that are on phase 2.
Thanks, Bill. Any last questions?
The only other comment, Your Honor, I would make is you don't have to look at all of these as one. So if 2 out of the 3 are acceptable to the council, or all 3, fine. You could vote on them individually if if you desire to do one or two, but not all three, or none at all. I guess that's up to the council, but
We have a resolution right now
to do them all.
for all three, so we'll call for that vote and see where it falls. Roll call, please.
Armisen.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
No.
Hagberg.
Yes.
Tony.
Yes.
That resolution fails. So, with that, the resolution fails, right? Okay. So, all right. There is no other,
Can I have a clarifying question? So, all three failed, so we're not gonna have vendor utilities and we're not gonna have a rain garden? Because, I mean, are we seriously doing this in Fergus Falls? This is beyond,
I mean, basically, if we propose this sign, then why didn't we bid for it? Why are we changing it now and doing a change order when we said that that's the sign we wanted in the first place?
I don't know, but what I'm seeing in front of me is, so in 5 years, when we have vendors that wanna hook up to utilities, we can look back to this council meeting and say, nope, we weren't doing that because of this one issue. You want that to be the staple of this city council and this project?
You know, I mean, this project is costing a lot of money, and ultimately, and now we're into change orders. So, and change orders come expensive.
Well, just so it's noted that you're stopping this project for those
No,
three things.
I'm not
for
stopping the
enhancements.
project. I'm stopping this particular piece.
yeah, and I believe that, yeah, go ahead, Caroline.
Can we, vote on these separately when we have everyone here?
I think it could always be revisited, so, I mean, I think at some point we can, this is, yeah.
Your Honor, if I may, is there any appetite on these other ones as well? Like I said, we could vote
I think we
separately.
can-
I would like to know sooner than later, but of course, we
Sure.
have time, but if it's enhancement number, what I'm hearing, number 2,
To revisit when when the full council's here? Is that what your motion is, Caroline?
Yeah, or can we vote on them separately tonight and still vote on them in the future if one doesn't go? Or, you know what I'm saying? He wants
If any-
answers on some of them, and I have a feeling that number one should and can possibly go.
I think they all three should go personally.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
Then all you're doing then is basically bullying, because obviously I voted against it, and that's something that obviously you don't agree with, so now you want to keep changing the rules so that you can get the answer you want, and that's not fair, and it's not democratic.
I think
So,
that,
thank you.
well, we're not finished, Anthony.
No, now you don't have a quorum completely. If you don't, you have to accept people have an opinion.
And we certainly have done that. We voted in. Okay. So, we can certainly revisit, anyone can ask to revisit the motion or the resolution. Correct me if I'm wrong, when the next council meeting, when the members are here that we're not able to vote on this, is that correct?
You have the right to revisit items that have not passed. You retain that right. You retain to do what you do. You retain to undo what you do. So the council has great powers, especially when there's a quorum present.
Sure. And we no longer have a quorum present. So, with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.